everyone, and welcome back. I'm John Lincove.
I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
I'm Michael Crossan.
And today we're going to be talking about the 2025 Audi Q6 e-tron SUV. Audi has redone its platform, its electric platform. You know, we experienced the initial the e-tron, which then became the Q8 e-tron, and then there was the Q4 e-tron, and then Audi went through a whole thing where evens were going to be electric and odds were not, and then they blew that up. So we're kind of in there. We're back into their it's the name, it's got a letter, it's got a number, and here we are.
And it says e-tron, which is helpful.
And it does say e-tron, right, because that the way things are going, there may be a Q6 with an ICE engine, and I'm not being facetious,
right?
The way the world is.
Right.
So the Q6 e-tron is a 5-passenger SUV. It's about 4 inches longer, 1 inch wider, and 1.5 inches taller than the gasoline engine Q5, the current generation. Q5 is being redesigned for 2026 as well. That's coming out later this year. So it's smaller than the Q8 e-tron, which we're talking about, which was the original platform. That will be discontinued after this year. So this is going to be the big EV for Audi right now. It's the first Audi to use the premium platform electric PPE EV architecture. One thing is, you might see on consumerreports.org, when we got ours in the winter, we did our first drive on it, and I actually wrote that. We saw ranges of 190 to 226 miles, and we wrote about that, but we know that because it's cold.
And even in reality, it was less. I had it for 4 days over like a long weekend. I saw about 130 to a full charge, but it was cold and it was windy. So, I mean, it is factors, but those are real world factors that you might have to deal with.
And 100%. We're going to test it and do our 70 mile per hour highway range test, and sometimes we see it comes in lower than EPA numbers. Sometimes it comes in higher. So we'll see that.
EPA ranges are impressive if we realize them,
especially compared to the Q8 or even the Q4. Those are just they were middling. Mike, what's it like to drive, because it has some new for Audi features?
Yeah, so new for Audi is real one pedal. Previously you could sort of have like this higher level of regen, but it wasn't a true one pedal. This has one pedal, so if you're into that, that's nice, but you can also configure the vehicle to drive using the brake pedal, if one pedal's not your thing. So that's kind of nice.
Can you explain a little bit about one pedal? Some people know, but just to kind of give to the EV neophytes, if you will.
So with one pedal, you can basically drive the vehicle with just the accelerator pedal, or gas pedal, if you will. It's sort of, you're adding throttle as you press the pedal, but if you back off on that throttle pedal, or the accelerator pedal, I guess I should say, it starts to apply the brakes. So regenerative braking, which is recuperating the energy that has been stored as the vehicle's moving down the road, and is charging the battery pack. So it's a more efficient way of driving, and a lot of people do like it because you're not having to cycle between two pedals. Yeah. It's just sort of like a lever at that point, like an on-off, not like a switch, but like a range, if you will.
It's like turning the faucet on heavy and then that's a great going back because you get hot water.
So, but Audi didn't have that before. In the Q4, you could not bring the vehicle to a complete stop. You get pretty close, but would still always kind of roll. This will come all the way to a complete stop. I really like one pedal in traffic.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I don't like one pedal. So it's nice. And this has paddles as well, where you can kind of tailor the amount of regen as well. So I think they did a pretty good job there.
Jen, you were going to...
I was just going to... I'm not normally a one pedal fan because the regen often is too much for me. Not only do they have it, I found it very, very smooth. Like I could live with this one pedal. And you can do recuperation with the paddle too. Nice. So it had some really nice options for using it. If you wanted to just paddle down a little bit, you could. So I thought it was very nicely implemented for one pedal.
I'm a left foot breaker, so my left foot doesn't know what to do in 1 foot mode. But I like it a lot. And one of the things, and we'll go back to Mike in a sec, in I think the full mode, so the full auto mode, it actually will creep. Unlike, a lot of EVs, they won't creep.
Little bit of roll.
So you can have that. So if you're pulling into a garage, for example, and you don't want to slam into your workbench like my house, or, at a traffic light, you could creep up as a car moves forward instead of having to tap the gas, the electric pedal, we'll call it that.
They know what we mean.
But instead of having to use a throttle and then hopefully it doesn't jump like Rivians or something like that. So it is pretty cool. They didn't get it right the first time, because the industry was already going to one pedal. They got it much more right this time.
And really well implemented.
Yep. So Mike, what else about driving it, power and handling?
Out in the world, it has plenty of power. It's not like a rocket ship, but it's got plenty of power. But actually, it's actually sort of surprisingly fast. It kind of sneaks up on you. I did the acceleration testing. So the car's in test right now. Yeah. And I ran accels on, and I was actually shocked at what it did the quarter mile in. Like, it's knocking on the door of truly being fast. And I think we had talked about before, like even highway speed will sneak up on you because the car's pretty quiet.
Yeah.
And you look down like, oh boy, I better slow down just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It has so much nice, smooth power delivery. And I compared it to the iX, which was another vehicle where I would look down and go, whoa, I'm going a lot quicker than I thought I was, and having to slow it down. And the quiet, it's got EV noise, but to me, it's a lower pitch.
Yeah.
It's like more of a rumble
It's a little more
sound
pleasant.
as opposed to the the whinier EV sounds that we hear. So much less annoying to me. It was there, but much more in the background than I thought on other EVs.
Yeah, I think it's like really under just like strong acceleration. It's not driving around town and stuff like that where you just hear it almost like actuators are constantly going on and off, which gets annoying. And to that point of the acceleration, it's not neck snapping.
But it's deceivingly fast.
Yeah.
Which is fine because do you need? Yes, there's gonna be people who want it. They want 1.8 seconds 0 to 60.
Sure.
But for the most part, for a family vehicle, it's definitely quick. I'd like to see what the SQ6 is, and I know there is a launch mode that you can enable. So
correct. Yeah,
that would be even crazier. Jen, super technologically laden vehicle. I mean, if the Q4 was like, it's got some tech, this has gone far techy. And with the safety features.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the abundance of tech in a number of areas. But in terms of safety, it's got everything you would want. It's certainly got all of the ones that we want. The automatic emergency braking, the pedestrian detections, the highway speed AEB, as well as the adaptive cruise control, driver monitoring for distraction or drowsiness, not direct driver monitoring for partially automated driving, but a couple of things stick out. One is not only rear cross traffic warning, but rear automatic emergency braking.
Yeah.
So sensitive.
very sensitive.
I was trying to park it in our garage, and not only does it stop you, it throws the car into park.
Yeah.
I couldn't get into a parking spot. I think it stopped me 4 times. So again, we'll talk about the configurability of this car. I'm sure these can be adapted or shut off, but so sensitive. And then standard traffic sign recognition, which is typically something we like. It shows you what the speed limit is. It usually gives you a little warning. This one puts a little exclamation point
right.
next to the speed when you're exceeding it, which we've already said is very easy to do. But it also integrates with the heads-up display, where it's not only showing you the current speed, but what's coming, and it kind of layers it in. And I don't know if this is the right place to talk about the heads-up display.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Mike joined this episode specifically to do this. He wants to go in on it.
I'm a huge fan of heads-up displays. I like them very much. I had to shut this one off.
Yeah.
There is so much going on, and there's something with the depth perception of it in this car.
Yeah.
I found it very distracting, and I don't know. It's like watching someone else play a video game. Like there was a bit of motion sickness with it, and I had to shut it off, even though I lowered it as far as I could go, lowered the brightness as far as I can go. I had to get rid of it. So there's a lot going on.
To your point with the layering of the speed limit signs or the sign indication, it gives it a 3D element. So it's not just up on the screen. So now you have the depth there, and it's very hyperactive. It keeps paging them. I mean, I was joking ahead, and saying it's like a meme, with the kid who keeps falling in and then it repeats and then it repeats. It's just like that and sometimes wrong. I mean, sometimes it said 25 miles an hour and I'm on a 40-mile-an-hour street, but it was close to a street that was 25, so it just throws it up there.
And it's got like the lane lines, which are actually almost sort of neat.
It's got some
because they
ADAS
actually sort of line up to the actual lines on the road. And it's the fact that they can do that is really impressive. But I don't want to use the word hate, but I hate head-up display and everything. The first thing I do is turn it off. Can't stand it. This one, I left it on as much as I could, and it was interesting, but way too much going on.
Yeah.
It was distracting. I found myself looking at it rather than, the road, and I did eventually turn it off.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. You begin to, it's like, you hear people crash because they were looking at the object.
Target fixation.
Right, target fixation.
If you've ever ridden a motorcycle or bicycle, that kind of thing.
Exactly. YouTube's full of it. But I found myself on I-95 staring at it. And, I'd have to like almost shake my head to get away from it. So that was
just
frustration.
clear your,
right.
set your vision back. It was I can't pinpoint what the aspect was with the depth.
Yep.
And like I say, unlike Mike, I am a fan of heads up display. Normally I shut it off.
Yep.
In this Audi 2, this promise of what they're calling adaptive driving assistant plus, where it's actually tying your ACC, your lane centering to your map.
Yeah.
And using where you are to help run those features. I know, John, you talked about it seemed like LCA only would come on.
Yeah, lane centering assistance only come on when you're in the mode with adaptive cruise control. What's also interesting, and this we'll circle back to this, is that if you aren't logged into the universe, the Audi Connect universe, you don't then have access to the map, which means you don't have access to some of those features.
Right.
So then it won't do
right.
It won't tell you about the lane. It won't tell you about a number of those features. So now you're in the whole like, oh, now I've got to be in their universe always.
Yeah.
And what's that going to cost me?
Do I want to use CarPlay?
Yeah.
You find yourself with those decisions, or stay in the Audi universe.
Yeah, exactly.
I will tell you, and maybe this isn't the right place for this either.
No,
Sorry,
let's just say it's all the right place. We're just going to go.
This is one of the most tailorable cars I think we've been in a long time. There is so much that you can set to your own preferences. And I will say, changing them is not really difficult.
Nope.
The menus are reasonable. They're straightforward. They're
There's
big.
a lot of them.
But there's so much that you better be using the memory features of what do you want the drive select to be? What do you want the heads up display to be? What do you want your safety features on or off? There is so much that you can set and change.
Yeah. So I bought the car, but needed a ride up to the dealer. So Mike was volunteered, I think, by John, voluntold to go. And it was a bad day for Mike because you generally do the setup of the cars in-house, and we don't like the dealership to do all of the presetting. We want to go and experience that. This was different. So lay it on.
The salesperson was like, it's going to take about 90 minutes to set the car up. And I was like, that's not happening. I'm not doing that.
We want in, out,
one
done.
of the reasons they want to make sure it gets done right. So they want us to do it there.
Yeah.
But it's part of our check-in process on all the cars. And I manage all our apps and the passwords and the users and that kind of stuff. And we need to make sure they're all set up properly. So we do it here. And they really didn't want to let us go because it's very important. I think Audi wants to make sure that, for the customers, that it gets set up. And I think that now that I've experienced this, it makes sense.
And they weren't even fully trained, I think, at the time when we got delivery.
We were their first delivery.
The
salesperson, I think, had the day before gone to a class on the vehicle. So he was sort of excited about getting to use what he learned as well.
Yeah.
But I convinced him that we're not spending 90 minutes here. Like, I'll take care of this. And he gave me some tips. You need a really strong 5G service.
Yep.
And at the dealer, they were saying their parking lot wasn't even good enough. They have like a church up the road that they go park to that has better signal. And that was here too. We're out in the woods. So I went to a local business in town, sat in their parking lot. It took about 90 minutes. Yep. So, I mean, the timeline was right. And you're not doing stuff for 90 minutes. You do a couple of things, and then you just have to sit and wait. And there's like a little progress bar, and it's 15, 20 minutes. You just sit there. And then you pick another couple of things, and it's 15, 20 minutes, and you just sit there. So it was pretty frustrating. Yeah. But you do go through, I'll say all, and we'll come back to what all means, but all the options. And the idea is that the salesperson is like, this is what this is. Do you want this on or off? They explain them, and you can choose to set it up. And going through it, I just turned everything on because it's a new car. We want to experience all the features. And then as we all rotate through it, as part of our job is we go through, turn them on and off and see how they all work. I turned everything on, but there were a couple of things that didn't get turned on. So I don't think I missed a step. But the rear would have, or the one that didn't come on didn't even ask me for, prompt me for, was the rear seat warning, for passengers to check the rear seat. And that's a big one. We like that one.
Emily will be on that because she gives more credit if it's
absolutely
on.
So I went in and turned it on, and it seems to work just fine, but I didn't find that in the initial setup. So, I mean, it is possible. Maybe I missed it, but I just followed the guide as you go through. But it took forever. I mean, I set up a lot of cars, and usually 15 minutes is like on the high side. And this was a legitimate 90 minutes. Yeah. And I had to go off site for it to do it to get a good, cell signal and things like that. And, but I would say if you're buying one of these,
I was just going to ask you for the
budget the
average
time,
buyer. Yeah.
Don't do it when you've got a meeting that you have to go get, block out the time, sit with your salesperson or the delivery coordinator and learn how to use this vehicle. And I would say turn everything on figure out what you are going to want to use and what you like, and then turn things off as you're like, yeah, I don't really need that. Turn that off. Start with everything and pare it down.
Yeah, it's particularly troublesome in that buying experience isn't enjoyable anyway. Where you go in and the car's ready and okay, and we'll go over the features of the physical car,
right?
And then we'll talk to the F&I guy, and they'll try to sell guy or gal, and they'll try to sell you ceramic polish and turtle wax, blah blah. And you're no, and you go through all that, and now you have an hour and a half. I mean, maybe the salesperson started it, and they'll come in and check with you. Maybe they'll stack the time, but it's a lot. It becomes almost it's a commitment. 4 hours of buying a car,
and some of the configurability. A lot is safety features, but a lot of it is how it drives. Like I found myself, I didn't care for the ride and handling when I first got in it. When I changed it to dynamic mode, I was much happier.
Right.
So some of it is the driving of the car, and some of it is the other stuff layered in on top.
Yeah, no, to your point, setting it up for the individual drivers. You share it in the household, even if you have a primary, the secondary driver. It's not just the seat position.
No.
It's everything. It can be everything to the position of the HUD and preferences.
And again, so this car, if you're not logged in as your user, right? So ours is, Consumer Reports.
Yep.
And for some reason, this car, it logs you out of it, or it's very easy to switch over to guest, and then you don't have a lot of these features available. And a lot of people are in the car, they don't necessarily realize that they're in as guest and stuff doesn't work. I even think it happened. Steve Ellick did the video on the car, the review, and I think at some point it got logged out, and there's like a pin you need for it and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And granted, we're multiple drivers in this car, so it might be a little easier if you're just like one person and this is your car, but it could still happen. You could still inadvertently get logged out in as guest, and like the stuff you thought was on is no longer on. So you really just kind of need to learn this car and pay attention and, make sure it's working for you.
And probably, keep the app. The app is going to talk to the car, and that's going to be a lot of it. I mean, or they do the keep card instead of, they have a key, but we'll talk about that too. But the key card, a lot of talking back and forth.
Right.
It's a great example of, gone are the days of get it and go.
Yeah.
A couple nice things I found, when I spent time with it. For example, it has L2 chargers on both sides. One side is a high speed, and the other side, so one side's a CCS, combined charging system. The other one's just a level 2. But it means you don't have to do some kind of awkward rearranging. Now, it doesn't have a NACS, the North American Charging Standard plug, and so that port, so that's like a miss the boat type of thing, because that's where the industry is going. But yeah, I didn't have to pull it back into my garage, which is, again, it's not the earth-shattering problem, but for me, it's annoying because of getting the kids in and out with a garage pole, and some stuff.
And so I have a comment on this one too.
Yeah.
So again, I had it in the winter, rain and snow and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I charged at the house, and I used the passenger side charge port, which is just the level 2. And it got all iced up, and I was closed, and it looked like it was closed, but it wasn't actually closed. So I was out driving around. I needed to stop and charge. I went to a DC fast charge. I couldn't open the DC flap because the other flap still wasn't closed. You can only open one at a time. And visually it was closed, but it wasn't latched. It was all iced up.
And it's powered.
So it took about 10 minutes to like fiddle with this thing to clear out the ice, for it to close so the other side would open. And it's freezing outside. And I was not having a great time. No. So just something to be aware of. If I own this, I would just use the driver's side. One in case it was frozen open or broken. If I needed to charge out on the road, I could.
Yeah, that's a good point. Fair point. A lot of comments that, to your point, no real electric motor line, but also great brake pedal. Not always do we get into these electrified vehicles that they have a mushy pedal. It'll be grabby. Yeah. So
that's what as we say all these things about, so much going on, the driving. Hopefully we're getting it across that it's so nice.
It does drive really well.
And it's a great driving car. If you can get your memory in and not be the guest and get all these things set for yourself, you're probably very happy in this car.
I mean, I think each of us found it comfortable for the most part to drive. I know you said the seat was a little stiff or
a little stiff, but it was comfortable while driving.
Yeah.
Where I became uncomfortable was while sitting and charging. And I don't know if that's because I was no longer in my driving position and I was just hanging out in the car for 30 minutes, while DC fast charging. But that's when I was sort of like, I became aware of the seat.
Yeah.
Jen, how was it for you?
It was good for me. Nicely contoured. I got in the back. You talk about, I really like the size of this car. I'm a Q5 fan anyway, so just a little bit more. I was perfectly comfortable in the rear seats. again, if I had my 6-foot son or you were trying to get in the rear seat, somebody's moving forward in the front. But I think there's room to do that. Nice cargo space. I really like the size of this car.
I don't think it's a 5 adult vehicle, or at least a 5 adult vehicle for a long trip.
long time,
you know.
right.
But teenagers, you know, preteens, definitely it's fine. Family vehicle. Stiff ride. A lot of people talked about porpoising almost, head toss, a lot of head toss that it would, you have this going down the road. So Jen, if you could give us some thoughts on that, and Mike's.
So when I first got in, I'll roll back to where I first get in. It was set on individual. So I don't know what that meant. There's like 5 drive select
There's a bunch
versions you can use, including an off-road. I'm not sure I'll take my Q6 e-tron off-road, but
gravel road to the
anyway,
cabin, maybe.
To me, at first, it was a little detached. I won't say you couldn't feel it, but it was a little too soft, too boundy for me. Very numb, detached steering feel.
Steering's very light.
Yes.
Yep.
I went to dynamic, much happier. It did definitely I think it stiffens up the suspension a bit, let some impacts through, but I wouldn't call it harsh. It was good for me. I now liked the car in the dynamic drive select.
I think overall it drives pretty well, handles pretty well, at least under, let's call it reasonable kind of handling situations. If you push the car, it'll do some things. But I felt like the front and rear suspension were actually like 2 different cars almost, and not worlds apart, but just the tuning between the front and the rear was like, there's something going on here. But if you change the modes, it does get a little better. And it is a little stiff, not overly stiff. But I mean, that's the thing with EVs. They're so heavy, you just can't let the body move around, because once it starts to move, you'll never control it. And they all do that. I think most EVs are too stiff, with the exception of the Porsche Taycan. That thing rode great. It handled great. So it proves it can be done. It probably costs a fortune to make that happen. You know, because that car's really expensive, but it is possible. But I'm on the boat with you. It's appropriate. It's a little stiff, but like, it's not harsh. It doesn't beat you up.
It was worse than the iX. The iX rode better.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think you get the wheel tire combo with that as well. Just things punch through. So maybe it's not hitting you just on every seam and every rut, but when you do hit something, it punches through. But I knew that there was a balance, because I was watching my vision with the head-up display.
I think that makes it accentuates it too, right? Because you have this thing that kind of moves and floats, and it's just compounding errors, I guess. And then it's when it shows up.
You talked about some fatal flaws maybe with this car, you know, things that, you know, were just like no-goes on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not an inexpensive car, and they put a lot of stuff in it, which is fine, and you're paying for that stuff, which, I mean, you should pay for the stuff that the car has, but I think as you turn things off, the overall experience gets better. There's just so much. And I found over the days of being in this car, I just kept turning things off and off and off and off, and it kept getting better every time I turned something off. And if I was a buyer, I'd be like, well, I paid for that and I'm not using it. That would really annoy me.
So it's a we can do it, so we did, versus we can do it, should we?
Yeah, it's like, why? You know, they just did it. I don't know, but I don't feel like the car is groundbreaking. You know, I don't know. I'm a little mixed on it. It's not a terrible car, but it's kind of like, why? Why is it so expensive? Why? You know, why all these things? Why did they put so much stuff in it? Just because they have it and they could. And, you know, again, there's nothing wrong with that, and you pay for it, but like, I don't really want it all.
So Jen, what about the controls in there? Because I mean, you know, we've talked about charging and driving, but I mean, you're living inside it, you know, once you're set up, you're still using that interface.
To me, right. So there's the configurability, which is all the things we talked about, which are in the menus on the screens. And that's straightforward. I think where the issues for certainly many of us came is the controls that are hard controls that are either on the wheel, on the armrest, that there's so many and they're flush, you know, that capacitive type control. I know we talked about window switches. You go for them, and it's not that they're hard to get to. They're a little back, but that there's so much other stuff that's in the place where you think they're going to be.
Right.
Yeah, there's 2 sets of controls.
Yeah, on the armrest.
Right, and I think the window switches, for me, they are too far back.
Right, I think
my
seating
elbow
position
hits, you know, I can't reach them. And where the other set of controls are is kind of where I want the window switches, because I think I'm going to use the windows more than the stuff that's in the other one. It's like backwards. It's like they're from 2 different cars.
Yeah, it looks like 2 different worlds. And there's so much there. There's headlight controls in there. There's mirror controls in there. There's lock controls. There's rear window lock controls. There was a bunch of stuff
Yep.
in that flush mounted. And every time I went for the windows, I hit one of those. Same thing on the wheel. Every time I went to change the volume, which there is a hard knob, but there's also one on the wheel, I changed the station. Because everything's small, close, etc.
Yeah, you swipe.
It'll be interesting to see where Maddie ends up on UX and the controls. Because it's there, and some of the stuff, climate, hard buttons, or at least selectable buttons, window switches, hard buttons, stalks, but there is this overlay of tech.
Yeah, it's not like Volkswagen where they have the selectable windows, thankfully.
That's not great either.
It is interesting. You know, the doors, you could see that they're the same panel. It's just that when it's a right-hand drive, they just have so they have blanks where stuff is, and there's a blank on the driver's door where the lock would be. So many people commented like, I just wish the lock button was there and not hidden away. Because on the other side, I see it and it's right where I want it. So, we talked about a flush steering wheel and that. The climate controls, to your point, better than some.
Yes.
You know, better than some GM ones or Lexus in particular, you know, that they're there and they're present.
There was this article this week. It was in Wired, on Wired, about how, and a lot of people, and we take some heat from you guys who watch and listen and saying, well, you guys, if you owned it, you'd get used to it type of thing. But this article talked about the layering and complexity of controls and how, the reaction times are actually longer than drunk driving or high driving for basic, when they're nested in very deep menus or things like that. This one probably will be okay because a lot of it's there, but it's not, it gave me the sense it's not just us that need to get used to it. Sure. And, we've heard Volkswagen in the last couple of weeks say they're going to roll back to some hard controls for commonly used items. Certainly the European New Car Assessment Program, they've said, hey, if you're talking about wipers, vents, lights, etc., they're going to be hard controls, or you're not going to get the star ratings or their ratings for safety. So I think we're seeing that it's maybe reached its limit, and you're going to see some of these automakers come back. And it's not just us. Who are saying it. And I think consumers are responding and going, whoa.
Well, to your point, vents in particular, I think, there would be a common response, be like, well, just put it on auto. Auto works. No, auto doesn't work if you're traveling with other people. One person doesn't like blowing air, but the car has to cool down. In doing this, I mean, if you're in a BMW and that had that, you're going to be change the volume as well. So annoying. So German cars, historically, Teutonic, austere, Audi, a little different. I think in the 90s, their kind of game changer where they popped up in the market much more was affordable, but also a really nice looking, really high quality interiors. This one's a little dour. Feedback on that. Jen, why don't you give us first your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I was happy with it. I didn't find it where you got in, I always say you get in and you go, there's either I paid money, so I want this to look nice. I certainly didn't get in this car with that mindset and go, a bit disappointing. And I do think you're right. The austere, I think of the no cup holders. Everything is what you would want it to be. It's a little complicated, but everything is there that you'd want. And I think it's well done.
Yeah, I think this is a case, if you open the door and you like how it looks, you're going to really like it. Personally, it's not for me. It's not a very welcoming interior for me. It doesn't kind of have the stuff that I sort of like, especially visually. But when usability is taking a little bit of a backseat, we talked about the buttons and the switches and stuff. So it's just, I think you're going to like it or you're not. And you're going to know it when you see it.
It's well assembled. It's well constructed.
Yes,
it has
absolutely.
the details like the double stitch, exposed stitching and such. There's some hard plastic swaths in some places. The brown interior is much nicer. It's lively.
Some contrast.
There's contrast to it. One thing.
He has props.
I have props here today. The key is this piece of plastic, which is fine, but for I don't even have the price on it. Like almost up in the $70,000 range, it pales in comparison to the 2023 A6 that we have. I mean, it's minor and sure. Oh well, you just keep it in your bag or you use the key card. Who needs a key? It just is a little thing like that. It's just the heft
perception,
to it.
The heft, the lacquer.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah. It doesn't feel premium, the weight a little bit. It doesn't feel good in your pocket.
It doesn't feel good in your close.
It's so close.
Visually, they're very similar, but This A6 key feels much better.
The Volkswagen GTI that we're taking a look at with the new controls, for example, the key is so much more premium than that key. It's minor, but yeah, it's kind of a miss. It's a big miss, considering you have a company like Porsche that makes it look like a car itself.
Our car too has like this little bit of utility look to it. Big, thick, all-weather floor mats. You know, maybe you combine that with that little off-road button, and maybe this is a more utilitarian Q6 than we thought.
Okay, all right. Mike, what advice would you give a prospective buyer of the Q6?
I would say shop around. You know, go to Audi, drive one of them, drive a Q5, go to Mercedes, go to BMW, drive some vehicles and make sure that this is sort of the right choice for you and spend some time with it. You know, if they just have their little test drive around the block, like turn some stuff on, turn some stuff off. There's a lot in this car and you need to determine, A, do you want to pay for all that stuff? Because do you like it and are you going to use it? You don't want to pay for it if you're not going to use it. So I think that's a big thing. Make sure this is the right car for you. And if it is, you'll probably really like it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to lay right. It's almost the same words, but I think if you take it for a test drive, you're going to love this car.
Yeah.
But you need to know, people now need to know what their pet peeves are. What can I live with and what can I not live with? And to sit outside of the driving part, to sit with this car for maybe the 90 minutes or an hour that you might spend with the dealer and just say to them, I'm just going to sit in this for a little while and do things that you normally do. I go back. I used to be before there was CarPlay and all that, I was a scanner, a station scanner. If you're a station scanner or you're not, what are the things that matter to you? Get in your driving position, get out of the car, get back in. All of that to echo Mike, spend some time in this car.
Oh, so we do have our first drive up on consumerreports.org, but we're finishing up testing. So that should be up relatively soon when you're right around when you're watching this or shortly thereafter.
So much to talk about on this car.
Yeah, it's a lot. So that's going to bring us to our audience questions part where we say, if you want to get a cool Consumer Reports logo t-shirt, send your video questions, send your text questions, go to consumerreports.org/talkingcars. And that's where you could submit them. And then you can wear that t-shirt and sneak in the gate and have lunch with us on a Friday.
Drive the Q6.
Drive the Q6 and maybe carry some, cones out to the AM course.
There you go.
Anyhow, we're going to go to the audience question from Chris first. He says, my son and I were discussing our newly purchased used 2017 Audi A3 e-tron, which we love so far. When asked about horsepower, I explained that the Audi has 104 horsepower from the electric motor and about 150 horsepower from the gasoline engine, for a total of about 200 horsepower. My guess was that the way they work together wasn't a straight addition problem, but I thought maybe you could explain it for this vehicle and potentially others. For a bonus question, when driving a vehicle like this with a small battery range, about 18 miles or so on a charge, is it better to drive electric as far as you can than switch to gas or use the hybrid mode? I typically do that and then switch to sport regen mode as it's the most fun, but is that the most efficient way to do it?
It's a long question you got there.
Mike, we're going to do some maths, right?
Yeah, we can do a little gazintas.
Okay.
This might not satisfy the physicist commenters on YouTube, but here we go. So there is crankshaft horsepower and then there's wheel horsepower, essentially. And that's from parasitic loss because you're moving a bunch of weight and parts and things like that. So that's one reason. Wheel horsepower is always less than crank horsepower. But combined horsepower, by definition, if you Google this, and I did, and you get the little Google AI answer, it is the sum of horsepower from a gas engine, electric motor, add them together. That's your combined horsepower. But it's not that straightforward because nothing is that straightforward. Horsepower is basically a representation of work being done. And the most common one that anybody probably knows is wattage of a light bulb. We know that a 100-watt light bulb is brighter than a 60-watt light bulb. The 100-watt light bulb is doing more work, so watts is a rating of work being done just like horsepower. And horsepower has a definition. There's a horse and a pulley and all that kind of stuff. But basically, the reason this doesn't match up necessarily by the numbers is because RPM matters when it comes to horsepower. Horsepower is a calculation. And the gas motor, the ICE, makes peak horsepower at a certain point. The electric motor makes its peak horsepower at a different point. They don't match up. So when you combine them together for this combined number, it's not necessarily that straight sum number. So it gets a little confusing. And here's the big thing, right? Horsepower is the glamorous number. It's usually a higher number. And I'm going to quote Bob Lutz here. people buy horsepower, but they drive torque.
Yes.
Torque is a real measurement of
Yes.
power, and that's what moves the car down the road. Horsepower is just the thing to put in the brochures and on the TV commercials and that sort of thing. So, with that, yeah, you're right. The numbers don't necessarily add up. So it's combine all that plus crank horsepower plus, wheel horsepower, and it gets a little
Messy.
muddy.
Yeah.
The second part of this question is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
What's the most efficient way to drive a hybrid or essentially a plug-in hybrid vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And their vehicle does have a smaller EV range, let's call it. But even if you have a much higher EV range on some of these cars, like the GLC 350e can do like 55 miles
right.
As an EV. Typically, the most efficient way to deal with this is use it as an EV around town. EVs are more efficient at lower speeds. Once you're like above 55 miles an hour, you're really just pushing wind. So a lot of that extra energy is just getting the wind out of your way and things like that. So if whatever your range is available, if your round trip is within your EV range, just use it as an EV. Even if you're on the highway, if it makes sense, you can get back home, you can charge it. Because typically, especially if you're buying the electricity at home versus paying for it commercially, you're getting a better rate at home. It becomes cheaper per mile to drive an EV than it does a gas car. That being said, if you are going beyond your EV range, once you're on the highway, flip it over to hybrid mode because the gas motor is now more efficient. And you can save some of that EV range for when you get off the highway closer to your destination. And let's be honest, driving the EVs around town, I think, is probably a little more pleasant than on the highway. Anyway, they're quiet, they're smooth, all that kind of stuff.
A little quicker acceleration.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that's the kind of the right way to go about it. You need to use the features and the buttons and stuff like that in the car to make that happen. Just don't set it and forget it and drive the car. I mean, you can, but you don't get the most out of it.
It's given the age of the vehicle, and it's not his car, but 2017, it's fairly advanced to have the different modes to save it, because you don't see that as much. You're seeing it now with plug-in hybrids, to save it, to charge mode, et cetera. But I think, Jen, is that how you drive EVs generally, or PHEVs, excuse me, plug-in hybrids?
Yeah, and I have a short commute. I do exactly what Mike says. I let it use up the EV. And then what I learned from you just now is the switching over. Is to not necessarily, I tend to use up the EV and then just use the hybrid portion. You're saying use it where it's most efficient.
I try to manage it.
Yeah, and manage it a little closer.
I'm going beyond the range of the EV.
Yeah.
If you have a short commute and you can do it all on EV, do an EV.
And that's right.
I'm almost 100-mile round trip. I can't take one of these PHEVs on full electric.
Right.
Even if I go back roads, I just can't do it. So I use the EV on the back roads and that kind of stuff, and then switch it over to hybrid. And it's efficient and it works.
And to
then,
I would say
there's another part to this question too. There's like 5 bonus questions. Right. Talking about putting in like a sport mode or a charge mode, basically, because you can have the ICE run and charge the high voltage battery. I did some experimenting back when we had the Alfa Romeo Tonale. We had it rigged up for our city fuels. I did it the way we normally do, which is just in hybrid mode. But I was like, I wonder what happens when you put it in this charge mode. And Alfa had some name in Italian for it that I can't remember, but I put it in this mode and I did our city fuels course again in that mode, charging the high voltage battery. And it was more than 30% increase in fuel consumption while charging the battery.
Right.
So that's not the efficient way to do it. And like, I'm all for sport mode, but just understand that it's not efficient. It's fun, and there's a trade-off, right? You're paying to have some fun, and I am all for having fun in a car. Just know that it's not the most efficient way to do it. The most efficient way is plug it in at home.
Yeah.
And to your point, John, I was just going to say, 18 is not a lot in today's PHEV levels, to your point.
Yeah, it's like Subaru Crosstrek hybrid, early on one.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you for that one. Thank you, Mike. Excellent session. My brain.
I hope that, we didn't really do math, but I hope the math.
My brain is full. I
Yes.
think now too. So, our second question comes from Derek from Hingham, Mass, who says, I am looking to trade in my 2022 Mazda CX-5 for a larger family-size SUV. My must-haves are reliability, good value, 4-wheel drive, average fuel economy, and the ability to fit 3 Labrador Retriever dogs. I'm okay with CPO or new, and I don't need the top trim model, but do enjoy luxury and safety features where I can get them. So, P.S., I thought a picture of my labs, Stanley and Tucker, will help your response. So on the screen now, we see Stanley and Tucker.
Stanley and Tucker are not lap dogs.
They're not lap dogs.
These are big boys.
But we also have Jen's pup, Darcy, I think, on the screen. So Stanley and Tucker, you have a friend to show you the good sniffing spots if you ever come to Connecticut. But, jokes aside, Jen, what car would be good for Stanley Tucker and And Derek.
And again, when I'm answering, I'm thinking mainly of Stanley and Tucker because they are not small dogs. And I am surprised, actually, that Derek has been driving a CX-5 because what I would say is that sloping roof line, that cargo area slopes pretty dramatically. I know that Stanley and Tucker are cheating up towards the seats to get enough headroom.
Yep.
So I would say go for some additional squareness in that rear cargo area. And where I honed in on was mid-size 3-row SUVs. Even if you're not really using that third row, you might get a little more space back there for them. So I was saying Hyundai Santa Fe, a much more square body style than it has been. Very comfortable for them. Might be a little high as they age, but there's always helpful ramps and steps you can use. And then used Hyundai Palisade, perhaps, new or used. One thing I did caveat, though, is coming out of a CX-5 into a Santa Fe, into a Palisade, you're going to have a different driving experience, Derek.
Yeah.
The CX-5 is a peppy, nimble, SUV, and you're going to know you're in a larger vehicle.
Yeah.
So, and I just wanted to share my plan for Darcy, which is why I put Darcy's picture in there, is I have this balance with, I really want to take her places. We cannot have pets in our test cars. So I have to use my husband's pickup truck right now and put her in the back of that. But I want a small pickup with a cap.
Yeah.
And it's this battle I wage between wanting to take her, but not wanting her in my cab with the hair billowing everywhere. She's a golden retriever. So I'm going to put her in the cap again. I'll balance temperature and things like that as the seasons change. But this idea of having a place for her to go without necessarily messing up my whole car.
Yeah.
But anyway, just a thought.
Good suggestions. I was thinking of that Santa Fe. Mike,
So I don't know anything about dogs other than they make me sneeze.
There you go.
So I don't have a lot of dog experience. However, I kind of went the square route as well, right?
More math.
Honda Pilot. Honda Pilot is the answer. The current Honda Pilot. So you could probably get a used one now that's a year or two old. They're fantastic. They drive great. They're reliable. They've got all the things. If you want to spend a little more, Lexus TX500H is a riot to drive.
Yeah.
But if I was spending my own money, I'd still probably buy the Pilot.
Yeah.
Because the Pilot has a really nice driving experience, but it is square. It's got the room, I think, for the dogs. Again, a little higher than this Mazda, but there's ramps and steps and whatever. I've seen those, on Instagram and things like that.
You've heard about them.
Yes. So Honda Pilot, I think, is the answer.
Okay. So I went used on my selections and thought both about the CX-5 experience, but also square. So using Consumer Reports reliability data for used cars.
There you go.
A 2019, 2021, or 2022 Toyota Highlander hybrid.
Yeah.
Square, bigger than the CX-5, reliable, good fuel economy. Car base, low enough, you're getting, again, ramps potentially in the future for hip issues for the dogs, but that's one option. Or the 2020, 2022, or 2023 Mazda CX-9. Not the new one. Not the new one at all because of the reliability. But he has a CX-5. He's going to be used to the sportiness. It's a little of a smaller 3-row compared to maybe the Highlander. I mean, if you start getting in measurements out. So, you have some options there.
Yeah.
I think
CX-9 is not quite as square as some of the ones we threw out. I was saying, and I too was looking at reliability of this segment. It's not as stellar as some of the other segments, like smaller SUVs. There's not as many super reliable vehicles to pick from.
You get some weird years, you get some bouncing in and out.
Yeah, so look closely, Derek, whatever you choose. Come to consumerreports.org and look at the reliability year.
No, definitely. So, Derek, let us know what happens and let us know when the dogs are coming to play with Jen's dog.
Yes, come play with Darcy.
So with that, we're going to end this episode. As always, remember to send your video questions, your text questions to us by going to consumerreports.org/talkingcars. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.